Would you rather be right or would you rather be wealthy? And wealthy doesn't mean just money, it can mean that. But you can look at plenty of things. People are very wealthy in connections, in their ability to communicate well, in the way they relate to other people, their social currency. They have a lot of wealth in that because it's not enough to be right. Do you want to be right or do you want to be wealthy? You see what I mean? Remember, it's about these connections. That's why this is tips on better conversation. It kind of all starts with that. If you just follow some of these things here, especially just this one, just don't be doing this. And also, if I hadn't mentioned it, don't one up people. That's another way. That's a very fast way to break rapport. If you're that person that's always like, somebody tells you, man, let me tell you what happened to me with this. And they're like, oh, you think that's bad? Let me show you how my thing was worse. Alright, what's going on everybody, and welcome back, that is right, to another video. So today's topic is going to be some tips on better conversation. Now, why are we doing this topic? Well, because conversation and communication in general is going to be pretty much a central part of your life for the rest of your life. Alright, everything that humans do for the most part, have to do with relating to each other and relaying ideas back and forth in order to continue to build society and to continue to live. Alright, there's a lot of science on how humans became the most dominant species because we are not the strongest or the fastest or even necessarily the smartest. It's really more that we are creatively adaptable, and in society, in like groups of people, we can creatively solve problems and work together to adapt our way out of situations. That is why human beings have become the most dominant species that has ever lived. Alright, and we also have these extremely complex brains that have all of this neurocircuitry and whatnot to really in service actually of that specific thing, of this communication or conversation. So I want to make a distinction between the two. When I say conversation, that is the higher order, like with language and with grammar and all of those things. But communication in general can be seen throughout the animal kingdom. It's just that human beings are much better at it and have different and varying levels of communication, which allow us, like I said, to solve complex problems. This is a good thing. This is why we have all of the stuff we do, all the modern conveniences, and it's not just the fact that we survive, although that was what it was intended for when it first came about. So I believe it's called Dunbar's number that human beings have evolved to live in groups of people or in communities of about, I think it's 150 people. Alright, so that basically you know well, or have the capacity to know 150 people pretty well, their names, what they look like, the sorts of experiences you've had with them, how they relate to you, their strengths and weaknesses, all of those things, whether you like them or not. Now, that's a lot of stuff and data to keep up with for your brain. But what's even more so is the fact that those 150 people, you also know how they relate to each other in the same way. So you can see how this can multiply and multiply. That is why we have such complex cerebrums and our cerebral cortex and all of those things. Now, what does this have to do with tips on better communication? Well, because communication is so important for us, it's important to get it right. Alright, and for my first tip up here, I have, don't focus on what you are going to say next. This comes from our innate predisposition, I guess you could say, that we want to be at the center of the universe. There's this like center of the universe theory that our brains make us believe that we are. This hero theory. I forgot exactly what it's called. It's a theory, though, that you are the hero of this grand story that's going on, and everything revolves around you. Now, of course, on a global scale, that is not the case, but there is a correctness in your brain telling you that story, because it helps you conserve your resources. It helps you keep yourself safe. and do things that will keep you alive and a functioning member of society. I have another video on here that is about this sort of topic. It's about it's called functional selfishness. Some of you might know that as not functional selfishness, but like a sort of selfishness that is, you know what I mean? Like it's something that's needed. Like you need to have a certain amount of selfishness. You don't go to work for free. You don't do jobs for free and just give all of your money and resources and food and time away to everybody else just for nothing. Nobody does that because that is not functional. Functional selfishness, healthy selfishness, is being able to continue to live and stand on your own 2 feet and solve problems for yourself. This is one part of the brain that is a system that is telling you, hey, you got to be an egotist because you need to have some of that stuff. Then there's another part that is a little bit more sympathetic with the group. It identifies with the group. It's altruistic. It's like, okay, but you also want to do some stuff to help other people out, all right? Because we exist in a community, and if the community is doing good, generally speaking, you will too, because nobody, the worst thing that could happen to you, especially tens of thousands of years ago, is to be on your own. If you didn't have really hermits or people who just did everything themselves and they left the tribe and were a lone wolf. You basically died if that's what you became. So your mind wants to connect and also wants to make people feel like you're connecting and you're understanding them. So you have those two systems, and there's probably more, but those two main ones at the same time dictating everything you're doing in a conversation, because your brain, now remember, this isn't conscious. You're not thinking like, okay, I need to do good in this conversation because I might die if I don't. If people don't like me and they kick me out of the tribe. That's not what it's thinking. But on a subconscious level, it kind of comes from that. This, don't focus on what you're going to say next, is both of those working against you a little. It's the selfish, the healthy selfishness, and sometimes it can get unhealthy if you're focusing on yourself too much. But the healthy selfishness, the functional selfishness working to, okay, I need to be able to talk eloquently, I need to be articulate, I need to be interesting, I need to look good, whatever. I need this person to like me. That's that healthy selfishness. Functional selfishness. Then you have the other altruistic side. But I also need to be thinking about what I'm going to say next so that I don't offend them, so that they think that I'm into them, that I'm finding them interesting, that they're having a good experience in a conversation with me, because we don't want them to feel like crap having a conversation with me. Those two systems are working together, and when you are thinking too much about what you're going to say next, the issue is that divides your attention to the point that you can't do any of it well. If your attention is divided too much because you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to say next? Remember, your brain only has so much energy, and it takes a lot of energy just to have conversation and understand words. Because remember, it's more than just words. Obviously, conversation, a lot of it is nonverbal. There's not, I don't think, now there are scientists who say different numbers. It's a high number of how much of communication is nonverbal, but I think it's more of a sliding scale. I think it depends on context a little, because you hear everything from, oh, half of conversation is nonverbal, or 75%, or 90%. And I think, like I said, it depends on the context. Because if you take it this way, if you are, I don't know, communicating with a wild animal, and all you have to go on is what their nonverbal stuff is, which is pretty much 100% of it. I mean, they might be growling and stuff. That's not verbal. That's more just tonal, and that's still not verbal. They're not saying, "Hey, I don't like you. Back off." And they're not saying that, but you understand what they're saying. So in that case, it's 100%. But you know why it's not always 100%? Well, take it this way: go watch a movie that you have never seen before or heard about in another language that you don't know. I guarantee you won't understand 100% of it, 90%. You probably won't even understand half of it. You'll understand that people are pissed off, or they're happy, or they're gleeful and stuff like that, but you're not going to understand the important nuances of why it's a movie and it's supposed to be entertaining. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a sliding scale, but nonverbal, definitely very important. Here's where its importance really ratchets up. And that's that. So science has determined that pictures and gestures, body language, all right, the even intonalities in the way something is said, and the aggressivism, the aggression, or the lack thereof, is processable by the brain. You can do it like some tens of thousands of times faster than it can do words and grammar and the language. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's why those other things are still very important, and we'll pick up on those quicker because they literally happen 40, 50, 60 something thousand times faster than words. Now, when you're in a conversation, what the issue is you using words most of the time. I mean, you're just using words, and it takes 40, 50, 60,000 times more energy and time to process that when somebody is speaking to you. If you are thinking about what you're going to say next the whole time, you're also processing that again for what you're trying to do. Do you see what I'm saying? It's doubling the amount of effort. So you're splitting the effort between two different avenues there, and that's why it takes you out of the moment. You need to be in the now, and when you're in the now, you're like, okay, listening to what the other party is saying, your partner in the conversation or whoever, and really with intent. That everyone says you got to listen with intent. You got to understand what they're saying. You got to be immersed in that. If you're doing this, if you're using that creative part of your mind to be like, okay, what am I going to say next? Am I looking good? Does this person like me? Do I like them? And do I like what they're saying? Do I agree? And all this stuff. Now, how do I craft a way to say this? Okay, now I've got it. Now, okay, I'm waiting for them to stop. I'm waiting for them to stop. I'm waiting for them to stop so I can say something. You're dividing that attention, and you're not going to be as immersed. You got to be in the now. I have a book over here called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's a bit of a spiritual book, but basically he's saying that with most things, you need to bring your energy back into the present moment. Yeah, the future is important. You want to plan for that some. And you want to learn from the past. That's not saying those things aren't important, but if all you're doing is thinking, God, remember what happened last time? Or, man, I need this to happen in the future. I'm planning 100% of the time. You're not actually listening and taking advantage of the now with what is happening in the conversation with your partner. Then it takes you out of it. And it also, subconsciously, it'll start to show up on your face. It'll start to show up in your body language. How open or closed you seem to feel. Are you making eye contact? Do you have like a contemplative demeanor about you? We're going to get into that a little bit. If you don't have those things, your body is subtly signaling to theirs that you have no interest in what they're saying, and your communication is not secure. It's like it's all over the place, and this is a waste of time. And you're signaling to them that they don't really matter that much. That is not something you want to signal. Like this Tips on Better Conversation, the whole purpose of having good conversation is to build rapport, to make a connection, to understand each other, to influence the other person. All right? It's not always about like, oh, what can I get? So I need to influence them very well. It's about like, hey, we want this person leaving feeling like having a conversation with me was a good thing. It was a good time. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is where that comes into huge play. Don't always be thinking about what the next thing is. Use it as a mental exercise, because by default, people, they kind of default to this because your brain is telling you, hey, you're the center of this story, man. You got to come up with your thing so that you can look really good in this situation. All right, let's talk about the next thing. One way that you can accomplish this is with this amazing silence. Came out of this book, or I think it was this one behind me it wasn't this one, it's the second one here, this white one. It's Daniel Pink, To Sell is Human. And in one of the techniques they came up with, he's like, if you find yourself doing that too much or interrupting is worse. It's basically doing this, but you don't even have the decency to let the other person finish. Now, you might not be thinking that, like, Like, you're not saying, oh, I'm not having any decency, screw them, I'm just going to interrupt. Most people don't actually go through that mentally and just decide to interrupt somebody, but that's what you're signaling to the other person. When you interrupt, it's like doing this several times over. So, in order to temper the brain's natural tendency that most of us, almost all of us, are born with, to be thinking about us, what we're going to say next, or trying to interrupt, or any of those things, this amazing silence comes in. And basically what this is saying is, when the person is done with their sentence or with whatever they're saying to you, you take 5 to 15 seconds, depending on the situation, and you pause. Don't say anything. Don't react. You can have a little filler reactions like, okay, or I've never thought about it that way, or wow, that's very interesting. And you do this too with your face. You see this, I've never thought about it that way. That's very interesting. You raise your eyebrows, that signals, and open your face up, like, that signals to people you're trying to take in more information, because when you raise your eyebrows up, your eyes can literally see a little bit more. That is a very, remember we're talking about at 50, 60,000 times faster can a person process that than you saying, oh, that's very interesting. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you say them together, if you need to speak, if you have to say something just so that the other person you're worried they're feeling like you've just like sitting there like and for 5 to 15 seconds, that's fine, but use those body languages to signal to them that, hey, they're interesting, you're still involved, this is good, this is making the conversation more intimate. And that is the goal, what we're going towards here. Remember, opening up, taking in more information. If you're taking in more of them, whoever you're talking to, that's good. They're like, hey, what I got is good. They're involved, they get it. And that's where you want to be. If you close off, or you're just like closing your eyes, or you're scrunching your face too much, that signals the opposite, that you are not interested in more information or in them, period. That breaks rapport, and there's no quicker way to have somebody really just not like you, or just not, oh, they're not worth a damn, or my time, than to break rapport with them. Okay, now, there is a use of this kind of face, like, because sometimes you can go, I've never thought about it that way, and then do this, like, I wonder what that could mean for me, because when you narrow your eyes, it can send the signal of you are narrowing your focus. Be like, okay, with this specific thing, that was really important to me. We want to really consider that and spend time on it. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So if you, because the reason I'm bringing that up is 5 to 15 seconds can seem, even just 5 seconds of not reacting, not saying anything, pausing, so that you don't do this, so that you're not focusing too much on what you're going to say. Even the act of doing just 5 seconds may seem like an eternity. It's a while compared to what we're used to doing, like saying something in 1 second or less. Do you see what I'm saying? So I bring it up that you might want to put a little bit of those filler and softening phrases to show that you're involved, but you're not actually giving your opinion yet. You're like, that's very interesting. I've never heard that. I've never considered that. Let me think about that, or whatever. It'll help with that, but it won't say that, like, you won't just go right into, oh, this is what I think about the situation, because that can imply often that you don't care about what they just said. All right, let's talk about the next thing. We'll come back to this. Never argue. There is basically no faster way to break rapport than to argue with somebody. And once rapport is broken, once somebody has become disenchanted with a conversation, there is almost no saving it. It takes 10 times the effort to save a conversation than to just keep a decent one going. It doesn't even have to be a great one if it's just decent. But when you break that rapport, that influence, that's when people do this. That's when they close off. That's when they are not interested anymore, mentally, emotionally, physically, in any of your message. Okay, in order to become a good communicator, I have a lot of books on communication. All right. In fact, this one on top of To Sell Is Human, Never Eat Alone, is basically about connections and connecting to people, communicating with them, and making them feel heard. A lot of these concepts And some of these techniques even are shared across multiple different books and publications. So never argue is definitely one that a lot of people who are really good at rapport, especially with the right people, don't argue outright. If they want to disagree, they'll find some sort of way around it. And not in the, oh, we're avoiding the subject. It's more of a in service of curiosity, of opening. Remember, opening the body. Don't do this. Don't scrunch yourself. Don't any of that stuff. You want to be open when you're having a conversation. Eye contact is important because when you're looking away too much, that signals that, oh, what else is interesting out there? This person isn't. You want, I'd say about 70% eye contact. When somebody drops a bomb on you or like some huge like piece of information and it's intense and stuff like that, it's okay to be like, huh, okay, because some people are very visual in their thinking. And if you're always looking at somebody, for some people, it depends on how you are made up genetically. If you're always looking at something, then they're standing kind of in your pictures and it's hard for you to picture something. So artfully, if you need to look away, then when they're kind of done, just be like, ah, okay. And try not to do this. Don't look like just to somebody else that's around, because people are smart. They can tell when your eye level is catching something else. As much as you can help it, you don't want to be doing that. So, anyways, the never argue thing. The better thing to do is to respond with curiosity, to have a curious mind about it, and instead of being like, I don't agree with you, or you're wrong, or you never want to say those things. You say kind of like what I was saying before. Huh, I've never thought about it that way. Tell me more. I haven't heard that much about that subject, or that, I've heard these things, and I've kind of gone along with this sort of opinion, but I've always been curious of this other side. Those people love to hear those things. People love to talk about, remember, if you want to hear someone talk on end with great enthusiasm about something, tell them to talk about themselves. And their beliefs counts as the same thing here. So even if you don't outright agree, and even if it's clear you disagree, the very fact that you're able to open up curiosity will set you apart from so many people, because everyone else wants to just shut off. So just doing that will set you apart. Now, the curiosity here, I talk about these cognitive biases sometimes that we all kind of develop, and they're basically ways the brain sees the world and then has you behave in a certain way depending on what sort of stimuli is coming up. For example, this one I'm talking about is, they call it novelty bias. All right, maybe even curiosity bias. The novelty is basically just the newness. Novelty bias, your brain likes you to react certain ways to novelty because it's like, oh, something's new. This could be fun, this could be entertaining, this could be good for us. There could be reward. Reward bias is another one, but there could be reward. That curiosity is one of the best, emotions that you can experience. They say, there have been people who have said, like philosophers or something, that anticipation is the best emotion out of all of them, even better than bliss and happiness. Anticipation is even better. That's like when you're on your way to a wonderful vacation. The best time is probably when you're on the way. When, hey, you wake up that morning, you're packed, you're going to the airport, you're about to check into your hotels. Before you even do any of the fun stuff is when you're the most excited. So the anticipation and having the curiosity, that novelty bias, tie into that, is you're anticipating, and these are contagious. The other person seeing that novelty bias working on you and that anticipation and stuff, they'll start to catch it. Now, they won't say it in these terms. They won't say, ooh, look at that dude, the novelty bias is working on him right now. That's good. Let me have it work on me. They don't. Your brain doesn't work that way and go through it. But have you ever seen somebody behave with a lot of enthusiasm and it fires you up? And you might not even care that much about what's going on with them, but you know how that feeling feels, and the feeling is contagious. I went to college for a little while, And everybody who's been to college can probably relate to this. This is really cool. This was after I had left. So I was in a grocery store parking lot. This is like, you're gonna love this. And there are these two girls that they weren't walking together. One was coming out of the grocery store and one was going in, but they knew each other, so when they saw each other, they're like, oh, hey, and stuff. And one said to the other, like, oh, hey, oh, did you hear? Mr. So-and-so, their professor, said that we can use our book on the next test. And they're like, oh, yeah, great, awesome. That fired me up. I wasn't even in the class. I'm not even in school anymore, and that fired me up. I was like, oh, hell yeah, right? And that's how I felt. So remember, these things are contagious. Feelings are. So that curiosity is. So you want to respond with curiosity. Don't argue. That doesn't mean you have to outright agree. Oftentimes you want. Nobody agrees 100% with everybody. There's almost no such thing. Now, on certain topics, maybe, but like if everybody was exactly the same, like I say this all the time, we'd all wear the same exact clothes, they'd have the same exact designs or no designs at all, same exact color, we'd drive the same car, there would only be one movie or TV show that was ever invented because everyone liked the same thing. There's no reason to make something else. Do you see what I'm saying? You want there to be differing opinions because that's what an opinion is. Remember, for the most part, opinions are never wrong. If they were a matter of right or wrong, they would be facts and not opinions, not beliefs. They would be truths. So there can be several right answers to the same question, even if the answers themselves conflict with each other. They can all be. So like, what car should you drive? Maybe you want to drive a Toyota Tacoma. Maybe you want to drive a Nissan Altima. Maybe you want to drive a Lamborghini Aventador. I mean, plenty of people want to. We're not talking about are you able to. We're saying like, what is your want? If you could drive whatever. Some people just want like a rugged pickup truck. Some people want a sports car. Some people want a family hauler because guess what? They got a family and they need to haul them. Some people want like just a little two-seater, like a Miata or something. The point of the story is those are all correct answers to what should I drive, depending on the situation. Right? And not everyone's going to agree on that. In fact, for the most part, you're not going to agree with each other. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. So never argue. Respond with that curiosity. Trigger that novelty bias. Because when you do it inside yourself anyways, remember, novelty is almost as good as agreeing and having that validation. Novelty and anticipation, and if you can trick your mind to like new experiences like this, people are going to love you. Because even if they don't agree with you and they already know that, they're going to like the kind of the dynamic that you bring. A lot of people will cite Bill Clinton, President Clinton, as the preeminent person of this sort of thing. Whether or not you believed in his politics or his personal beliefs or any of those things, a lot of people, his opponents included, were like, dude, this dude is charismatic as all get out, man. He has that open mind. He has that connection. He's not always focused on what he's going to say next. He gives, you the silence and enough time to really say what you're going to say. Whether or not he outright agrees, you felt heard in your presence. They say that, in his presence. They say that in his presence, it felt like nobody else existed. Even if he's in a room with 1,000 people. When he came up to shake your hand and to talk to you about something, he was in the now. He was focused on what you're saying, not on his next thing. This is where you want to get. And remember, this never argue. That doesn't mean he or anybody can never argue. Sometimes you got to with things. There are debates and stuff like that, but it's better to debate than to just outright argue, because it's not really advantageous and helpful to perpetuate an argument to where it's really combative. That's the issue. When you debate and problem solve, that's not as combative as it's camaraderie. Do you see what I mean? Even if it's with people that have differing opinions, you want that camaraderie feeling. Remember the 150 people. Those people aren't all going to agree on stuff, but you don't want to argue. To win an argument is to lose a sale. And that sale can be replaced with many things. Sale can be replaced with friend. To win an argument is to lose a friend, or a friendship, or to lose a date, or to lose influence, to lose rapport. Let me give you an example. You can be right about something and placate your own ego by proving to somebody like, hey, no, this is right, this is right, this is right. And you might actually be right, and you finally prove it to them. Are they gonna feel good afterwards, though, with that interaction? You will win the argument, but you will lose the overall war. The war being like, hey, we want to have not a traditional war, we want to have as much rapport as possible, as much influence. That's what you want to win. You will lose that, and that's important because you might get what you want with that argument in the moment. A lot of the times you'll get what you want and lose it immediately afterwards, but eventually, of course, you will lose it because the people aren't going to want to talk to you no more. That's why you don't want to win an argument is to lose a sale. Okay, this is one of those things. They say, would you rather be right or would you rather be wealthy? Because you can look at plenty of things, and wealthy doesn't mean just money. It can mean that. But you can look at plenty of things. People are very wealthy in connections, in their ability to communicate well, in the way they relate to other people, their social currency. They have a lot of wealth in that because it's not enough to be right. Do you want to be right or do you want to be wealthy? You see what I mean? Remember, it's about these connections. That's why this is tips on better conversation. It kind of all starts with that. If you just follow some of these things here, especially just this one, just don't be doing this. And also, if I hadn't mentioned it, don't one-up people. That's another way. That's a very fast way to break rapport. If you're that person that's always like, somebody tells you, man, let me tell you what happened to me with this. And they're like, oh, you think that's bad? Let me show you how my thing was worse. Or, oh, you think you did good with that? Let me show you how I did better than you with whatever. That is a quick way to break rapport. I've been guilty of this as anybody else, and not even trying to be like, oh, my thing is worse or that. There's a certain amount of that you want to do to connect so they know how you understand, but try to make it about something that is neutral or maybe a little less intense. Neutral in intensity to their thing or a little less intense, because if you do the more intense, it's very, very, very easy. It's a fine line. It's very easy to seem like you're doing that. Oh, I'm more important because you think your thing was big? Let me tell you about my thing. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you want to be like, yeah, I understand, yeah, this happened to me and stuff, don't go with something that is in huge contrast, that like it's way worse than them, or not to begin with, right? You don't want to respond with that. There's another bias called contrast bias, and contrast bias basically says that we pay a lot more attention to things that contrast, that are much different. So if they tell you a story like, yeah, my I don't know, my little kitten, it seemed a little sick, so I took it to the vet. I was worried, and it's at the vet right now, just getting checked out. But they think it's gonna be fine. It's just a cold. I don't know, something like that. And then the other person comes back with, man, you think that's bad? I understand, but like I had to take, I don't know, 6 kittens to the hospital earlier, and all of them ended up dying. You see how that contrast-wise is way more intense than what they were saying? That much of a difference comes from a place of placating your ego if you have to be doing that. Try not to do that. Okay, that's one-upping, and it's easy to do accidentally, because a lot of times you're just trying to connect. You're just trying to say, like, hey, I understand you, like, really, I understand you, and it will come off as my situation is more relevant. So, be careful of that one. Don't one-up people. I should have wrote this down somewhere. Maybe I will. Let's write this right here. Don't focus. Let's write right here. It's hard to write in between lines without erasing stuff. We'll put one-up people. See, I'm actually kind of doing it right here. See, when you draw on one of these things and you touch the stuff below, it's hard to write in between the lines. Let's write this one like this, so Don't one-up people. That way it doesn't look like an L. Don't lup people, whatever that means. No, don't one-up people. I don't want to be doing that. And then never argue. Let me show you something. This amazing silence, this functional silence that we talked about, is a good way to not argue, because when you put in that silence, you are actively telling your mind, especially if you want to argue, when you put the silence in instead, you're giving your emotions a little time to cool off, and you're showing the other person that you're actually considering what they're saying, like we said before, but it cools off that feeling or that tendency of you wanting to be like, oh no, you're wrong because of this. Take a few breaths. You don't have to be like, or something like that's obvious like that. Just, kind of take a few breaths. Like I was saying before, if you need some filler, just be like, I've never thought about it that way, or this is something that I've never completely understood. Respond with that curiosity instead, and do that over 5 to 15 seconds and contemplate. Have that contemplative demeanor. Don't argue. Have that switch to this right here, and this is what'll happen oftentimes. Because of the pause, because people have a lot of thoughts. They get some stuff out, and then they have to do the cognitive processing to come up with the next stuff sometimes during that pause. So they're doing that, and you go straight to this arguing. That shuts all that down. But if you do the amazing silence, a lot of times people will tell more of the story, and you'll start to actually agree with some of the stuff, or you'll at least understand. You'll be like, I can see why a person in your situation actually really understands that. That must be tough. Or whatever's going on. If you feel like you are trying to your mind is trying to put you in an argument. You see what I mean? So that's why that pause. You'll be surprised. I might do a whole nother video on this, but you'll be surprised how often in life that if you just pause, you don't do this during emergencies, but if you just pause during 9 out of 10 difficult situations that happen to you, just let it go for a little while, how it ends up working itself out, and you oftentimes get what you want anyways. Stuff is almost never as bad as you think it's going to be. Almost never. And that pause, this amazing silence, can be used. I like to call it an artful silence, or an artful pause, because you can use that if something doesn't go your way. And like in a conversation especially, like maybe somebody decides something, oh no, I want it this way, or I'm only going to accept this, or this is what's going to happen, and you're like, okay, and you kind of just accept it. Do an artful pause. It's usually longer than 5 to 15 seconds when you're talking about decisions or larger experiences, or not experiences, larger events. Okay, sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes it's a couple hours, sometimes it's a couple of days that you just need to give a pause and let it work itself out. And oftentimes the person or something, they'll come back and they'll be like, I was thinking about this thing, and a better way to work together, I do want to open it back up to have the conversation together and work on this together. You will be surprised with how often that'll happen. If you don't believe me, it's probably because you don't pause enough. If you react immediately to things and start giving all this closed off energy, this always happens, I can't believe this, why are these people doing this? A lot of times that energy will close you off, and you won't be able to accept new. So any opportunity that was coming will just bounce, it'll just bounce right off you. Here's you. So you're this person. Let's close your head up here. But if you have a really closed off demeanor, here come opportunities, and they just bounce right off you. Like that. You want to be this dude right here who has this really open, and it's probably permeable like that, to where you can actually get, and then this, you can get opportunities come in. This sounds silly. It sounds like a dumb, we probably want to make this circle completely encapsulate this guy with all that scrunch negative energy. This sounds dumb, but this is an easy way to understand it, how the things work. That openness, and the pause helps you stay open. So once you start arguing, it closes it off. But that openness invites in novelty, it invites in opportunity. It invites the other person to share more. The more you listen to somebody, for the most part, the more they're going to like you, and they're going to like the interaction with you there. Okay? So always remember, these are the tips on better conversation. Don't focus on what you're going to say next so much. Okay? Because that shuts you down. It turns you into this. It shuts down your energy field. Whether we're talking spiritually or like we're talking like there's such a thing as actual mental energy. And you don't want to shut that down when you're having a conversation because that shuts your rapport down. So remember that. And you have this amazing silence or this artful pause with things to help if you have the tendency of wanting to immediately say something to somebody or immediately start arguing. Put that pause in. It will help open your mind up to other possibilities and not doing these things and not killing that rapport. Right? And then the third thing here, obviously don't argue. Never argue if you can help it, because you may, and you won't always by arguing, but you may win the argument, but you will lose the sale, like every time. And the sale being the persuasion, the influence that you have, the amount people trust and like you. Okay, so thank you all so much for being here for this one. Please do like and subscribe and do all of those things that help me out so much. And we'll see you next time. Have a beautiful day.